Social studies ninth grade
I
rating.
almost forgot. What is going on here? No, I can watch it. All right, so as we normally do, we'll start with public comment. I see we have at least a few people here, although there is one person noticeably missing, but why don't we start on this end and work our way around? Robin, would you like to start?
Are we here?
Yes, please. And introduce yourself and where you live and take 3 minutes.
Don't fall, don't fall.
Please don't fall.
I'm Robin Bernstein. I live at Littleton Crossing. And I got a book out of the library named Traffic. It's by Tom Vanderbilt. And it's why we drive the way we do and what it says about us. And it's actually my experience. He's saying it, but I prefaced his notes. Okay, the car is free to terrorize pedestrians on roads because their identity is protected. Social welfare is the issue. Drivers lack metacognition, meaning they are unskilled and unaware. Traffic is a system of cooperation. The driver is not even aware that he is unaware. I'm good, I can do this. I can text, drink, dial, find my mints, find my song, smoke a cigarette until an accident. Driving is an overlearned activity. The more overlearned an activity, the less cognitive workload it imposes. 2 seconds can be dangerous, deadly. The longer they talk on their cell phone, the more dangerous it becomes. The weaving stops. I seem to be in control until a crash. Intentional blindness is behind an entire category of crashes. Look but didn't see accidents. Sorry, mate, I didn't see you. Accident. The faster you drive, the less you see. Drivers isolated in their anonymous devil wagons with a 3,000-pound advantage kill thousands of pedestrians every day. Cell phone conversations are extremely insidious. Driver doesn't notice their bad cognitive performance. Not wearing a seatbelt, unawareness, along with passive aggressiveness lead to road rage. Pedestrians get hit in crosswalk. Turning drivers not looking in right place due to cell phone distraction. Be aware, you might hit someone. Drivers are absolved in traffic world, which allows them to act in antisocial ways. As the number of pedestrians and cyclists increase, killings stop. There is safety in numbers. Please replace the flashing lights at Main Street and Alamo. There's yellow lights. Get flashing red lights. They don't stop. I almost got killed it's every day, but this is, by the light rail, from Vega Park to the light rail. The yellow lights, replace them with red. I know there is a dislike of exertion and physical energy, but I encourage everyone to ride the light rail and the 66 and the 0. Thank you. You're welcome.
Good reading.
Thank you.
I have trouble. I always stutter when I read aloud.
Practice this one.
You did good.
I feel intimidated.
Yeah.
She's good.
Welcome.
Am I going already?
Introduce yourself.
I'm Connie Cantrell. I've lived in Littleton my entire life. 6509 South Windermere was where I grew up. I'm now living at the Bradley House. I am here to ask to have the bus that came to the Bradley House and to all of the 5 different South Metro housing facilities. Before COVID, we had a bus that came to each of these facilities and came and picked up people to take them to the King Soopers or to Walmart that used to be down on Bulls and Platte Canyon. And this service would take people to King Soopers, let them shop, and then take them back. And it would go to all the different properties. There are 500 people in those 5 properties, and many of them, we don't have cars. The main reason I'm here, selfishness, is I'm going blind and I won't be driving. And seeing how people get around the Bradley House is concerning. Mary, we have here, has lived in the Bradley House for 10 years. She has Medicaid and Medicare, which means that a bus will take her to all of her medical appointments, but it will not take her to go get food. She actually has a childhood friend that takes her Judy takes her to the store, and Judy is disabled as well. We have people who offer their services. I'll take people for free if they know to call me, but we also have people who, for $5 here and there. I had a woman who wanted to go to Trader Joe's, and it cost her $15, both $15 each way to get there. We are the homeless are the most vulnerable, but we are a vulnerable population that really needs to be seen, and the services that we had in place to have them back. And I really feel it's really important.
Agreed. Thank you. I think we're on to you, sir.
Sounds good. Tonight, my name is John Marquetti. I live in District 4, and I spoke before the South Suburban Park and Recs Board earlier in the month about the railroad spur trail paralleling Mineral, going from Highland Canal to Jackass Hill Road. And they had said that they were going to, I heard they were going to pave it with concrete. And they straightened me out a little bit on that. They said that it was a little different dimensions, but it was going to be all concrete. Be 16 feet wide, 8 feet for bikes, 8 feet for pedestrian and runners. And I thought, oh boy, we're having enough trouble at Lee Gulch with the paving of that section between Prince and Mary Carter. They stopped doing that. And South Suburban pointed out that they're not taking the lead role in doing the concrete on the railroad spur trail that Littleton was going to. And so I'd like to ask them to look at that a little more closely, because I'm sure that as soon as somebody sees their concrete it in, they're going to ask you to stop it, just like they did Lee Gulch. And why waste the money when you can do it the other way? And that would be concrete on half of it and granite fines on the other half. And you'd be able to service all the mobilities. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Sure, I thought it was too late.
I think you made it just in the nick of time.
Well, I'm sitting in front of the chocolate.
Yeah, but give yourself a reward.
That's
after
my
you-
good look.
Yep.
I'm Pam Chadbourne, a little block and a half from here, and thank you for talking about the Transportation Master Plan update. I feel like we know that it was postponed, and many people here feel that was not great. It was not a good decision, and I'm glad that you're talking about it tonight. Thank you very much. For me, the steps that I want to see forward in the Transportation Master Plan is, before it did kind of, it was the first one. And so it kind of gathered the projects that were in the pipeline and listed them and kind of said, these are things we need to do. But now this update should really start to integrate the system of transportation in the city, document those systems. And we know now it's got to be for vehicles plus bikes and peds and other folks. And so we need those systems defined. And I look forward to that, because I think this group, more than many boards and commissions that I've seen, can succeed at that. Understanding and defining the system and how it functions, and making that system happen in Littleton. And you can see I'm smiling because that is just a great prospect to me. Really, I don't feel like I need to go further than that. Thank you very much for TMP, and good luck.
Excellent. Thank you. Hopefully we won't need it. All right. Everyone else sure no one else wants to speak? You're all here. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Let's move on. We're gonna slightly alter the agenda tonight. We had talked, Tom, Shane, and I had talked about this idea at the last planning meeting. we have a lot of follow-up questions for Shane, or for staff in general, but Shane ends up taking the brunt, but usually. We don't always make it a point to actually clearly come back with those follow-ups. And so what we're gonna try doing is adding into our agendas, the very first thing after public comment is to go through follow-ups that staff has from previous meetings. So try to keep it to 5 minutes, try to keep questions to a minimum unless there really are very pressing ones. And we're just trying to get this follow-up taken care of so that we can then move on to adding more to the next meeting. So with that said, Shane.
Reshare my screen here. All right, there we are. So, yeah, I think there were 3 that I had written down from last time to follow up on. And so these are the 3 here. One of them was staff clarification about rules around a joint meeting between the TMB and Planning Commission. So we reached out to the clerk's office and the guidance we got is, hey, yeah, you guys can have a joint meeting, but do it in the context of a TMB meeting and have it here as part of a study session. The conversation I had with the clerk's office was we want to, as much as we can, maintain the partiality of Planning Commission when we don't want it to look like the TMB or anybody else has kind of undue weight on the Planning Commission and that they should not, be looking at things that are not before them or could be before them in the future in a way that's not, part of the process. So yeah, so encouraged to do it if that's what we want to do. The clerk's office did say get some more guidance from the city attorney to make sure that Planning Commission is not diving into those issues, but said, yeah, just do it in the context of a planning meeting. So hopefully that answers the question. That was a quick summary there, but a summary of the conversation I had with the clerk's office. All right. One of the bigger questions last time was about the multimodal impact fees and how much we've collected and where those are used. And so this is a breakdown of what was collected last year, just over $500,000, and then the expenditures, and then where we anticipate those expenditures to go in the years to come. So these are all projects, multimodal projects that we have grants for and either are in design or going into construction. So
Quick question on that. And I vaguely remember that this was possibly a partial year, or was this the full year for 2024?
I believe it was a full year.
Okay, the previous year was the partial. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, in 2023, those numbers are, those loaders are kind of small, but I think that's at 16,000, so.
Oh, yeah, okay, it went up, yeah.
And what does the green signify in 2024?
So Brent Thompson, our city engineer, pulled this out of a larger spreadsheet, so I'm not sure what the green references over the red, so.
That's fair.
So about $500,000 is what we're collecting with this impact fee, yeah. And that is, did we verify that that's not earmarked for specifically multimodal projects, or it is earmarked, right, like?
Yeah, it is earmarked for multimodal projects, so.
Right, yeah.
And another question, so in 26, we've got 100,000 earmarked for bicycle pedestrian master plan update. Is that incorporated in the whole master plan update, or is that data we're trying to collect so that we can update?
Yeah, no, so that would be part of the update itself. So, and whether or not we have a standalone bike and ped, or whether it's, a section of the TMP, I think probably is open for conversation. But yeah, that would be part of the planning process, so.
Thanks.
Yeah, and Brent will be here next month to talk about CIP stuff. I believe that's next month. So we can, if there's any other detailed questions that I can't answer, we can ask him about that too. So. All right, and then the last one was just a list of city events. So I think this is probably other places on the city's website, but I think this was in relation to what are some events that the TMB, board members could show up to and kind of talk to people about their opinions on the TMP update and other transportation issues. And so we just provided a list of city events, so we can coordinate further. You guys obviously can show up informally and talk to people anytime you want, but any sort of coordinated effort we're happy to help out with. So. That was it, just those 3.
Any other questions on the follow-up?
Just a quick thing, can you email the list of events to our Littleton email so we have that?
Yes, yeah, and I think in the packet that I sent out last week, it should be in there.
It is as well.
Okay, yeah. It should already be in your inbox then. So.
It is.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Keep things moving along. We're going to have a follow-up on the traffic calming, an update, excuse me, on the traffic evaluation. I will ask since I get to be dictator for a day or whatever my job is for this, we're gonna try, what's that?
The dictator's right.
We're gonna try, what I'm gonna ask is, let's hold questions until the end of the presentation. So we can note it down, just to try to keep things smooth. I notice a lot of times questions are asked about a slide that's two slides ahead. If we just held on for a few minutes, we get answered. So unless that screws up the way you'd like to present.
No, I'm generally okay with questions, but I do like that. I think when I get to say I have some sheets with treatment details that I'm not sure if it really translates to you guys on a plan view. So I 100% welcome questions when we get to these slides that aren't in the package. These are
I'll
the
let you
updates.
guide when questions.
Okay.
At the very end, and then I'll take over.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right, so I'm Kyle Morris. I'm an engineer with the transportation group specifically. So I work with Shane and Aaron every day.
Thanks for sticking it out.
Yeah, they really test me sometimes. Like before this meeting, when Shane was like, "I need 15 copies of the presentation." Anyway, I'm here to talk about the neighborhood traffic calming evaluation / neighborhood traffic calming recommendations and toolbox that we are developing with David Evans and Associates as the consultant. I'm the PM on the project, but we do have pretty much our entire transportation engineering and planning group involved. So we get all voices heard within our group, and it's not just my engineering mind and being heard all the time. So overview of what I'm going to go today, and these are largely deliverables from this evaluation toolbox. Existing infrastructure assessment that was performed by DEA on our existing traffic calming features throughout the city. Slight touch in on peer agency review that they performed largely with Denver and Boulder to look at how they applied their traffic calming toolboxes and features and what works for them. What we've come up for our traffic calming toolbox, which is comprised of 8 preferred traffic calming treatments, and we have detailed design guidelines that we are still working through, but we'll have finalized for the purpose of really streamlined administration of the neighborhood traffic calming program and designing and installing these proposed treatments. Also, one thing that is very much in the early drafts that's part of the deliverables of this project is 5 location designs, where David Evans is taking the lead on applying the toolbox that they're generating, really used for a couple of priority streets and examples for us to follow as we go through and get traffic calming requests and do other projects. Important thing to note about this project and the traffic calming evaluation and toolbox and how it ties into larger city initiatives. It's aimed at fostering safety speeds on priority roadways, specifically local streets and neighborhood connectors. Directly aligned with the Safer Streets Initiative to improve overall safety, walkability, and bikeability. You'll find that many of the treatments, while targeted at reducing travel speeds, also have a byproduct of making pedestrian crossings more visible and also shorter and providing refuges to make crossing distances smaller. Additionally, this project was kicked off and had a good bit of overlap with the school zone safety evaluation. Now that is mostly completed, they catered a lot of these recommendations in the evaluation to piggyback off of that school zone safety evaluation. The way we'll administer this going forward, it can be used for a number of different applications and different projects, primarily predicated on use with our neighborhood traffic calming program. So getting requests from the public and evaluating those on our local streets and potentially installing them as they meet priority and warrants. It can also be used for application of development projects as they go in on local and neighborhood connector streets. We can use this toolbox to evaluate the streets as density increases and development happens. And also it's for, we can use it to combine with our normal capital roadway projects, and also our pavement management plan is a large yearly project that we like to piggyback off of and take advantage of some already ongoing construction projects. As I said before, this project still is ongoing. It's not finalized. I call it an update. This is our first real touch point. So keep in mind, this is where we're at right now. Still work to be done. It is coming together quite quickly, but it is still all in draft form. Moving on. So first topic is the existing infrastructure assessment, big overview. Existing in the city of Littleton, there's over 80 traffic calming measures installed since 1997. This count in the report specifically is 79, but that was prior to us installing several pilot projects with the delineators and C curb. So I just went ahead and wrote over 80. These traffic calming measures existing include traffic calming islands, which are just the islands that you see on the exterior of the road that create a smaller cross section at various points. Pedestrian refuge islands, so center refuge medians for pedestrian crossings, traffic circles, speed humps, speed tables, which are similar to speed humps, raised pedestrian crossings, which are speed tables combined with pedestrian crossings, chicanes, which give a horizontal deflection in the roadway, and also applications of C curves and delineators, which I'm sure you guys have noticed us installing a lot over the last year or so as pilot projects, particularly at trail crossings, around schools, park crossings. Moving on, so the evaluation, they looked at several different aspects of these existing traffic calming features. They looked at speed data. We use a service called Urban SDK. It's a phone data based data point. So we really use that as our first application to get relative speeds from around the city, and then use that to trigger a more in-depth study for more precise speed data collection. They also looked at them for physical condition. Is it falling apart? Does it look brand new? Is it good? They looked at the existing treatments for lane width, crossing distance. They also went out and observed several locations for things like user compliance, and a lot of visibility at crosswalks. One of the things that they looked at almost every location was how parking interplays with it and affects visibility. From these evaluation criteria, they provide high-level recommendations for improving the existing traffic calming treatments as well. A lot of that is so the large takeaway from the existing infrastructure assessment is that vertical treatments, as they are designed now, existing, tend to work pretty well, but we need some work on making our vertical or horizontal treatments like the chicanes and the traffic calming islands more restrictive to make people feel less safe. Or I guess not less safe, less comfortable driving at a higher rate of speed. As mentioned before, peer agency review, they did it primarily with Denver and Boulder. They looked at, which traffic calming features that they use that seem to be the most effective, and that's primarily off of speed data and user feedback, so their citizen feedback. And then also their typical applications and where they put these specific treatments, like what street types, and what criteria they use. Moving on to the traffic calming toolbox, which there are 8 preferred treatments. coming out of this evaluation. We have detailed design. There's several here that use vertical deflection similar to speed humps and speed tables, and several that are horizontal elements such as pinch points and chicanes. I'm going to start flipping through the details that we have provided. They're the design details, so we can see what they look like. The dimensions aren't on there, but so it's a high level view. But good point for questions if anybody has anything on, say, the existing conditions evaluation.
I have one question. Are these in order of preference here?
No, they're not. It's yeah. And the thing is, while we have these 8 preferred ones, there's also a few others, such as, you know, you'll notice speed tables aren't here, or raised intersections. That's just because they overlap in design so much with the raised crosswalk that we got guidance for the detailed design of the raised crosswalk, and then that's an easy extrapolation into a speed table or raised intersection.
So are the only examples of traffic circles in Littleton on the Lottie? No, where else?
No, they're all,
There's
Kaylee.
Kaylee, it was definitely someone Kaylee.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Haley, Gallup, Bellotti, and
Oh, yeah, that's right. On Gallup too, going down the hill, going north, yeah. And those are these says 8 preferred traffic calming features. Can you describe traffic circles as preferred?
depending on the situation, yes.
Yeah? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, you might touch on this, so I'm stealing your thunder, cut me off, but when they looked at like Boulder and Denver, Denver for sure, they're actually moving toward more traffic circles. Because they find them so effective in slowing down cars.
Is it, and this is me speaking of ignorance, I'm not challenging you, but like ours seem bad. And it like, what my question is it that there are better designs for the traffic circle? Okay, yes, you're all,
Yep, we
you're
have.
immediately nodding yes, okay.
Yeah.
They seem like the worst of a lot, like they slow people down, but they seem like, you know, like for instance, my son went to he's now at Heritage, but last year he went to Euclid and was like, why haven't they taken out those traffic circles? They seem bad, you know, in every way. So yeah, I was curious about that. So that makes sense, because I've been in really good traffic circles that are almost more rotary, you know, than they are a roundabout, you know, than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the big recommendations with our details is particularly to make that inside radius for the island larger, so it feels more like a rotary,
Yes, yeah.
create more deflection.
Then I'm very aligned, okay. But it's in its current state.
Yeah.
All of that's good, what we're looking for like accessibility and for some of the blind and visually challenged individuals. Some of these solutions make some of their navigating a little more difficult. What actions and design choices have you guys made to aid those individuals, as we do have a sizable representation in them?
So particularly in all of our designs, well, I'll just start flipping through here. If you'll notice the ramps, which this is a bad example, mid-block crossing. So they're more than likely going to be directional, right? But you see these curve extensions on the right-hand side, they involve recommendations to really not get rid of the current diagonal apex ramps and make them directional. There are things like RRFBs that tie in, which are.
For those of us who are not in traffic engineers, diagonal apex ramps.
The ramp going towards the middle of the intersection.
Correct. Yeah. So instead, you see how there's 8 ramps on this one on the right? You'll see in a lot of existing conditions, there are only 4 ramps for the entire intersection, and it points right to the middle of the intersection.
So the idea is to get rid of those.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. You'll see pretty much any new project we have in the city, we are getting rid of those within our project areas.
That's fantastic.
Except for what it does to the.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow, but.
No worries. No, I'm open. I'm open for questions, so.
So, and can you go back to the speed cushion?
By the way, is that like the best name for a punk band? ever?
Speed cushion. Yeah, so the speed cushion is essentially a speed hump. But you're shrinking it on the outsides a lot of times to make room for, say, bike lanes. And then you're also essentially making cutouts for emergency vehicles. And typically you'll see that, you don't see it right now, but or it's hard to tell. The center one, how you have the arrows going both ways, that'll typically be applied in the center of the road. So there's not really an opportunity for vehicles as they're going down the street, if there's traffic on both sides, to avoid the speed cushion and use those cutouts. Those cutouts are for emergency vehicles. That's the primary.
I'm not sure I follow what the cutouts are.
So you see how there's three separate cushions up there? In between, basically, it's just the
Yeah.
roadway.
So those are designed to work with the wheelbase of fire apparatus.
Got it. And if you had a sports car and you tried to do it, you'd rip out the undercarriage anyway.
Yes, you would buy one.
So I will, okay, so I thought that was what that was. I think it was in Aurora, I was on a road, next to a school, by the way, where they had something like that. And I watched 4 cars in front of me, and so the side was like the bike lanes.
Yeah.
4 cars in front of me peel into the bike lane to go around that, and there was plenty of room, like just enough room for a car to get through it. If it was a biker, they would have been toast.
Yeah, so we're aware of that concern, and we have, if you'll see, it's hard to see with the font, but the white flex posts that are on either side of those speed cushions on the detail, those are there to help prevent that. So the ones going straight up and down, that's the application for if there's a bike lane present. So you put those far enough downstream to disincentivize people from going around. And then also say on the right side where it's diagonal, that's a typical use that there's a parking lane present. So you put delineators so people cannot pass.
But a bike could get through that, the angled on the right?
So the angled is typical if it's just a parking lane.
It's
So
a bike.
this is the typical for a bike. And you would extend it farther than 2 flex posts. You would go out quite a bit better there. And then, yeah, bikes would be able to pass through.
I don't remember them being posts like that. I just remember thinking they made it more dangerous by putting that thing in there.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions on the speed cushion? Raised ped crossing, as mentioned earlier, this is the treatment that's on Main and Alamo and Prince by the RTD station.
Robin's favorite.
If you guys are familiar. They have been shown to increase compliance, especially compared to previously unenhanced mid-block crossing. So they have been very much shown to provide a benefit to traffic calm, pedestrian safety.
I think they're great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Currently, I would say these are planned to have the yellow flashing beacons. There are certain things that we're kind of stuck to in terms of national guidance and requirements, particularly the manual on uniform traffic control devices, which is national regulation. That last one came out in 2023, and part of the stipulation when it comes out, every local jurisdiction has 2 years to become in their design requirements to go into conformance with that document.
That supersedes local choices, right? It's not recommendation, it's regulation.
There are quite a few recommendations. There's a series of, they call it the mays, shoulds, and shalls. So the sections that say may and should, up to local policy a lot of times, or every time. But they're still giving their recommendations. All the shall, which is most of the document, that supersedes us.
Is that yellow flashing?
Yellow.
Okay, yeah, it is in the shall. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the red option is the pedestrian signal like we have at the Highline Canal crossing of Mineral. There's also the pedestrian hybrid beacons, which we don't have any within the city, but you'll see them throughout the metro area that do have It goes from a flashing red to a solid red. Those are an option, but they're pretty much a full signal. So they're not a very effective, quick build, quick application treatment.
So the one on Holly between Arapahoe and Dry Creek at the trail crossing there, they've got a double triangle of 3 semaphores.
That's the pedestrian hybrid beacon. You'll see it called a hawk signal, which how they got hawk from pedestrian hybrid beacon. It took a lot of creativity on their part. Yeah, yeah.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
So that would be a best case, plenty of money.
A lot of money. So yeah, as mentioned, the race crossing, it's a combination of having that, accidentally pressed next, of the flashing beacons for a mid-block crossing, and a speed table. You can also apply these at a stop controlled intersection as well. You just get rid of the flashing beacon and you have stop signs, but it still provides the benefit of traffic calming from the vertical deflection and keeping pedestrians at grade. And accessibility. So one of the big benefits to this for accessibility is pedestrians don't have to ramp down to street grade and back up. They just maintain their grade the whole way through.
Yeah, I think having cars go over it saying you are entering a pedestrian space is a very good practice, yeah.
So they don't, yeah, for the wheelchair, particularly going down those ramps, I mean, the ones in downtown, whatever that is.
Oh, yeah.
They're hammered by snowplows.
And FYI, Kelly just joined us online, so.
Okay.
You can start now.
Thank you. Sorry to be the problem child.
Oh, what an opening.
Hi, Kelly. I will reintroduce myself. My name's Kyle Morris. I'm an engineer with the transportation group here at Littleton. Giving a presentation on our in-progress traffic calming evaluation and toolbox project. So moving on to the next treatment, we have traffic circles. You'll notice several differences in signing, control signing, it being yields compared to our existing ones with two-way stop control. More roundabout type signage, but at a traffic circle. One thing that didn't make it onto this snip is the extra guidance for larger inside radius. So a good example of that is, you know, say you have a 30-foot street width with a 36 is a good example for our local streets. A 36-foot street width with a 15-foot curb return radius, which is the radius that goes around the corners of the intersections where the ramps are. That would, where we're at with our recommendations right now, that would result in a 27-foot diameter circle. What are the
Today, they're
existing ones?
probably like 12 to 16 feet, significantly smaller.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then
Because
is
the
there,
27 meant nothing.
is a Lottie, what is the width of that street? Is it 36?
No, I think that one's 42.
Oh, so even larger. Okay, yeah.
But another stipulation of the use of traffic circles is not when you have bike lanes.
Oh, yeah,
So that's
'cause-
also part of this.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we would not use them on roadways where we have bike lanes.
And I think that is a parallel route for a bike lane for Broadway, right? A Lottie is determined to be a bike path for.
Well, it has bike lanes on it today.
Yeah.
And then Powers as well.
Powers does not have bike lanes on today. It just has sheriff.
So would we, on something like a Lottie, we're thinking that we wouldn't be doing traffic or traffic circles? Yeah. Would we be doing curb extensions or what are the thoughts for Arapahoe and the other
I
intersection?
don't know yet, because we're just kicking off our Awadi Street corridor study.
Right, yeah.
That will dictate what we end up doing along here. We don't want to just go and rip out the traffic circles until we know what are we doing in place of them.
Prudence.
So again, understood, this is all, not holding you to anything, but like where your head's at is that there's a decent chance we tear out the traffic circles on Alani because not only supposed to be there when there's a bike lane.
It just doesn't meet current best practice from what we found with our peer agents.
Was the bike lane added after those were put in, or what was the sequence?
Well, there were bike lanes, but they were shared with parking. We went in along Alani 5-6 years ago and separated the bike lanes from the parking lane and narrowed up the drive lanes at the time. That was done as part of a pavement management project where we were improving the quality of the road at the same time. So we went and just restriped that time.
Yeah, and the applications where Denver, for example, is using traffic circles, it's on what they call neighborhood bikeways. So they're traffic calming to the point where they're getting volumes below a certain threshold and they're looking at 95th percentile speed. And so they're calming the 95th percentile speed down to like the speed limit or lower. And then they're saying, okay, that now we'll put traffic circles on here because we're expecting bikes to ride in the roadway because the speeds and the volumes are so low.
Like 20 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was riding on Ridge the other day on my bike going east towards Alani, taking a right there at that field. And there was snow and ice, you know, in like I had to ride in the road in order to be safe. And cars were not happy with me. And I was like, where else can I exist right now? And I was like, I also do not want to be in this lane. You know? So that's challenging because even if they know the speed is 20 and you're going 20, mentally they're like, I must be in front of you.
I need to be.
Yes.
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 In one of the ways
Yeah.
that Denver is lowering volumes and diverters so that there's not connectivity. So like we're not on a grid system, Denver is, right? So you can get everywhere with any street pretty much in Denver. And so what they're doing is they're saying this street is a bikeway, so we're not gonna allow cars to go all the way through to get to their destination. We're gonna push them on the higher, the roadways that are meant for more volume and then let bikes go through, but not cars. And so that's one of the ways they achieve it is through diverters and traffic calming and the whole thing. So a little bit easier with a grid, but can still be done, you know, in cities without grids.
We're grid-ish.
We have hints of grids.
For your traffic circle design, has there been any thoughts or interest in putting bike diversion lanes to get them off the roadway at the intersection and put them in like controlled bike lanes that are offset? Like on ramps or multi-use paths?
Definitely, we thought about adding it to the traffic calming toolbox. But the reality is the available right of way along these streets usually doesn't accommodate that. But say for full single lane roundabouts like that are going in at River Park, the new development at Santa Fe and Mineral, they will have, they have a full yeah, they have the cycle track, so they're removed anyway. But typical best practice for a full single lane roundabout is to provide an opportunity for bikes to get off. Something we keep in mind.
Basically what you're describing there is not a roundabout. It's not a traffic circle that's put in an existing configuration. It's redoing the whole intersection and building what's properly designed roundabout, at which point you would take the bikes off or give them the option to.
They'll take the option. If you push them up onto the sidewalk or the cycleway, if you will, they have to stop because now they are they're crossing the road as opposed to being in traffic. So there's a bunch of them out there in Sterling Ranch and we never go onto the pathway to go around. We just come out, take the lane and use the roundabout the way it's designed.
You're very confident.
Spandex wearing.
We're designing for kids going to school, families going on a bike ride.
There's still that problem, but now this kid has been doing 15 miles an hour and he swings up on there and he's coming in and now this guy's coming around the roundabout and he's in the crosswalk. As opposed to just staying in the lane and merging with traffic.
At that point, it's a matter of preference and what you welcome.
for the curb extensions. Those, like, is it possible that Littleton could have some sort of a policy of daylighting? You know, where, I mean, the curb extensions do a fantastic job of daylighting, and they're very much so likely to increase safety. So is that is that that's just a tool in the toolbox? We don't have a plan to.
For,
Yeah.
published policy, we don't have that at this point, but internal policy for new designs, we absolutely do look at curb extent, when there's parking lanes present. Absolutely, we look at daylighting and curb extensions for every single project that we design.
Little Raven is an example of this, right? Where the crosswalk right there, it makes it so that there's about this much space for a bike. But it is much better for a pedestrian for sure. Yeah.
Definitely have to keep the, whatever existing bike lanes are there into account. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're big fans of the curb extensions. One of the challenges with them is, drainage. It's almost counterintuitive, but there's a lot of flat spots to the city, and a lot of areas where we don't have existing storm sewer. And as you move into the roadway, you are climbing up a slope because the roadway is crowned. And sometimes your longitudinal roadway grid and what you're going up the slope will create a low point and a pool. So that's one spot where if you see where like, hey, we should have done that, probably a drainage issue.
Kelly asked, what is daylighting?
Yeah, I mean, you're the expert. I'm just a layman.
Sure. Yeah.
So basically daylighting, Kelly, is looking at the approach to a crossing or an intersection and eliminating parking or anything that could block sight triangles to see someone waiting to cross the road or see a car coming in another direction. So it's just pulling that back, pulling where parked cars are allowed a little further back so you can see further.
Yeah, a lot of safety. Yeah. And then also, like the great thing about the curb extension is that it's much shorter of a distance for people to cross as well. So I saw someone with a walker crossing Littleton Boulevard. They made it about halfway during the countdown, for them to be in the crosswalk. And they were stranded in the middle of the intersection. And I was like, we have failed that person, when I saw that. And so I think the refuge islands, and these I think are good examples of making it better for those situations. So happy to see those. Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing that's not touched on too heavily in this presentation on the slides, but many of these treatments, particularly the curb extensions, is a good example of. They've also provided guidance for quick build / pilot project layout. So we've already done several of these. Euclid is a good example of this, of doing curb extensions with plastic curbing and delineators. All right, next treatment is chicane. It creates a vertical deflection, almost, correct, horizontal deflection, almost a pinch point, get the driver to think it's purely for a speed reduction tactic. Same thing with the one on the right is a pinch point. It's hard to get a sense for what these look like without dimensions, but the chicane, the current design shows edge of, say, the island that you see with the brick hatching in it to the opposite side curb is 16 feet. So it pinches down your width from a typical, say, 20-foot 2-lane roadway. So there may be some yielding involved to oncoming traffic, but all for traffic calming. Same thing with the pinch points. The pinch points have a design width of 15 feet in between.
So for the chicane, if 2 cars were coming, they would have to dramatically slow down in order to navigate those. My neighbors really want that on our street, because we're right at the bottom of Fremont by Starbucks on Broadway. If you go to, there's that T. And when the teenagers are coming from Heritage to come up and climb up to Broadway, they floor it. As soon as they take a left onto my road, they floor it to that three-way stop, roll, don't even come to a three-way stop, and roll right through. And my neighbor said he got in front of a car like a little bit ago and pulled someone out of the driver's seat. And so like it's coming to a head.
Absolutely.
So that could be really fantastic to see something like that.
Not to be a naysayer, but you really think that's gonna stop a teenager from speeding through there?
I think
It was like a racetrack.
I don't think it will stop it, but I think it will dramatically improve it. I think that, especially when there's traffic going both directions.
Yeah, I think for this application, you really see the most benefit when there's frequently oncoming traffic.
Are there any examples of this in place in Littleton? I don't know that I can think of anyone.
Not to this degree. We have some pinch points, but it's a lot wider. It still provides plenty of room for traffic to go through.
You would do this where there weren't opportunities for a pedestrian crossing? Because otherwise you'd just do a raised crossing, right?
Potentially, raised crossings have other issues like I'll say with drainage and stuff. They can
Yeah.
be really expensive. So there's, the chicanes and stuff are a good option for putting things where you don't have people crossing stuff, and that's.
One thing without the raised crossing, if it's one where for some reason we don't think a raised crossing is appropriate or achievable, say for drainage, that's kind of a typical mid-block crossing with traffic calming elements over there on the left-hand side, where you have a kind of curb extension, pinch point on either side in the refuge island to really, it doesn't create that perceived conflict with oncoming traffic, but at least it trims down the side. One thing that I do have to give a lot of credit to for South Metro Fire is those decreased widths. I had apprehensions when I first reached out to them, thinking that they would want 26-foot wide, no questions asked, but they were great to work with, and we worked on these widths with them.
That's great to know.
Kind of a more of a alternative to the motorists and everything. Are we doing like vertical curves at a lot of these, or are they gonna be like hardened sloped items to allow for, if there does need to be a bypass in like, say, an emergency situation, or just somebody that isn't adhering but another person is, that they don't have to take severe damage to their vehicles and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So the speed tables, it's not shown, and the speed cushions, they are, limited in a way that, it doesn't really, it won't damage a car. So the speed cushion particularly is 3 inches in height. It has a more abrupt, rise to it than a speed table. It gets to that height over 3 feet, so you'll feel it. But the 3 inch for, a vast majority of stock cars, you have to modify your car and lower it for that to be a major issue, particularly for the speed tables / raised crossings / raised intersections. It's a 4-inch rise over 10 feet, and that's something that's been developed with emergency response in mind. So those will work with passenger vehicles as well.
And I guess the other question, this is more of a maintenance concern, but have you designed more resilient, like hardened noses and everything? Because a lot of these will be ran over, whether we like them or not, and it's not fun to go replace them every year.
Yeah, so that is a very good point. One thing that does need more thought, specifically with the pedestrian refuge island, one thing that we apply on our own full design capital projects is a nose that slopes down. So particularly snow plows, if they hit it, it reduces the likelihood of damage by a lot. So we do think about it, not reflected on this, but yeah, still draft form, but very great point. Okay, any other questions on chicanes or pinch points?
I think I figured it out, but just to confirm, the the striped, the things that look like little barber poles.
Yeah.
Yeah, outside the barber shop. Those actually are like vertical stand-up things that are going on the
Correct.
bump out.
Those are
Yeah,
signs
okay.
that say, don't hit me, I'm a vertical curve.
Do you think
Got
from a design perspective, it could be good to have that line going over to the side because it makes it look like it's a stripe in the road right in the middle?
Oh,
of the
yeah,
street?
yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it took me, but I got there. I got there.
Yeah, I gotta say that the pinch point gives me a lot of anxiety. The idea that we're creating a place that there'll be a collision, people don't slow down or yield, sounds like a bad idea to me. So I have a lot of anxiety about the pinch point.
Was there a guidance on what volume of streets to use these on? Because this isn't like Santa Fe
No,
or.
yeah.
There could be volume
Santa
restrictions.
Fe, that would be.
I don't have that number
I was going there.
currently, but yeah, volumes and speed need to be taken into account, so we're not gonna.
This is just the land of the cowboy. People don't want to yield. And so that seems like that one's counterintuitive to me.
So
So
you see the same issue with chicanes, maybe even
Whereas
worse?
with chicane, you're not creating a space where people will run into each other if they don't yield to each other.
I
In
think you would.
pinch point, I mean, that's what I thought I heard him say. The expectation is that two people hit it at the same time, one side's gonna yield. And that strikes me as maybe, that design doesn't make sense to me.
Totally, it does seem counterintuitive. One thing that I failed to mention is all of these treatments, a big guidance point for traffic calming and a traffic calming principle in general is one of these treatments in a vacuum, like just installing one of these treatments isolated on one street is never gonna work. So we have recommendations to really do effective traffic calming. You need to space them and do several at a spacing of 200 to 300 feet. So say for this pinch point, it won't be just wide open street to a pinch point. It'll be a series of other traffic calming features that lead into a pinch point. A lot of times with say like the vertical deflections, sort of the goal speed is to get them down to like 15 miles per hour before they approach this pinch point.
This was the preferred and recommended thing. So apparently there is virtue to a pinch point. Could you tell us about why it's a good thing?
In the right application, like Kyle's saying, it's very effective because people do have to take turns then. You don't tend to just fly through here.
Yeah, I've shared it before, but I like in a counterintuitive way. Like they found that it's safer if you have four-way yield than a four-way stop because everyone is thinking that they all have to be on guard instead of thinking you can be the one person to just go right through.
Less entitlement to the right of way.
Yes, and my assumption is that this would be similar, where like you really have to be cognizant as you come into this, and certainly some people would not be. But yeah.
I would say to Robert's point, it is not something that is very common in the front range either. So I think the only place I ran into him is both. And somebody in Denver, somebody in Aurora, especially Highlands Ranch, they're gonna look at that, they're gonna have lots of opinions that probably aren't positive.
And the point really for the target streets for this local and neighborhood connectors, they are local streets. They're not intended for streets that have passed through thoroughfare traffic. So there's definitely a need for messaging it before we install it. And then after, with the installation, there's advanced warning signs to give people the heads up before.
One application I could see where it could be really beneficial is maybe as like one of the mechanisms in the schools to isolate like the loading, unloading areas where you want a very rigid control, because if you have traffic has to go in one car instead of two into a loading zone, it's gonna be almost impossible for there to be accidents unless there's like road rage or something.
Which there is. Morning drop off for sure.
The behavior in pickup drop off areas is a challenge.
Tire rippers.
The real life application of this that you see every day in Denver is a lot of local roads where they allow parking on both sides.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible for cars to pass each other two ways in those streets. This would just be formalizing that essentially.
Yep.
I believe this is the last set. Treatments, gone to this page a few times. The pedestrian refuge island for mid-block crossings, it's a combination of curb extensions and an island, say if a pedestrian feels the need for safety to stop and take a break before crossing, they can. It also narrows the roadway, reducing comfort for drivers. The big one that we haven't touched on much, but have touched on a little bit on Denver's strategy with the neighborhood bikeways and reducing volumes is diverters. So we do have recommendations for a diverter. Right here we have detailed design recommendations for a diagonal diverter, but you can do it going straight up and down or side to side as you see fit to restrict movements on certain local streets to create that volume.
There's a area in Barcelona that did these with super blocks, and they have, these diverters to make it so no one goes through the neighborhood. It's only just local traffic, and they made it so there's little pockets of them, and they had really good success with those as well. And they started turning them into parks, actually, where the diverter is. They just made little green strips, and really cool.
The other thing to note about, although it's volume reduction for cars, there's pass-through areas for bikes, so bikes can continue on through these without problem.
Where in the city might something like that? Is there a thought on like a specific intersection that you might be doing that?
We do not know yet.
Would that be like for the redevelopment downtown, like, what was it, Curtis, that they were thinking about making it a multi zone, pedestrian zone and being able to block it off?
They were thinking about it, but yeah, potentially, although in that case, what they talked about was still allowing emergency vehicles to get through. So you have to design it appropriately for them. Once we get into our TMP update next year, we might start getting into more details about corridors that we want to be bike corridors, or that we want to be roadways that we take from a connector, for example, and reduce them to a local street. This could be one technique to do that. Put some diverters at strategic locations that force people to use other parallel roads if they want to go further. So that could be one example. We don't have something in mind right now where to put this, but we felt like it's a useful tool in the future to have it as an option.
The green is that's a bike symbol, is that what that is?
Correct, yeah.
I just couldn't tell from here.
That's to clearly indicate to bikes that they belong there.
What's in the middle between the two?
Just another island, small island that would prevent cars from using the bike cut.
So for bikes, it would be a coffee shop.
All right, that's the end of the treatments. My last slide is just heads up on the location designs. We're very early stages of these, so they're David Evans and Associates is taking these toolbox design treatments and applying these to these corridors and point locations. So they include Irving Street from Berry to Bellevue, Haley Avenue from Prince to Windermere, Stern Parkway from Alati to Broadway, and a couple of trail crossing locations at Lee Gulch, at Prince Street and Windermere Street. These four don't necessarily indicate a priority for installation, although there are a couple that are high on our priority. We really found that these are good typical applications to use as example guides for our application. That's all I have, so thank you. Any other questions?
I followed Jeff's instructions and wrote my questions.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Sorry, we have no time for
questions. Give everybody some candy. Everybody did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I have I have a concern that your evaluation missed out on one of our primary traffic calming tools, which is dips. That's how we calm traffic on Easter. That's how we calm traffic in front of the library.
It's the most effective
Yeah.
way to slow
And
people.
so
One muffler torn out and you slow down.
I'm actually, I'm very much thinking about this evaluation from the communications standpoint, and the face validity of the evaluation is missing when one of the main real traffic calming things we use is not part of the evaluation.
Dips are not.
I assume that was drainage.
They are. That's the point.
They serve as one, but they are not.
But that's, see, that's.
What's the difference?
Yeah, see, I see that as a real problem when the engineering staff focuses on design or definitions versus reality.
Well, the problem is because dip is going to hold water. So you need to have the drainage designed properly.
But they also function as traffic calming.
They do.
And so by not including them as part of your evaluation, your face validity on studying traffic calming is lowered.
Well, okay, let's look at it from a different perspective. What you're talking about is this thing can slow traffic down.
Does slow traffic down.
But that thing we can't just put anywhere, right? It has to be the right.
But it is literally the primary tool for limiting traffic speeds between the library and the museum.
Hold on, you guys are saying different things. And the reality, like none of these 8 things we're saying just goes anywhere, anytime, just throw it down, you're good to go. I mean, they're all like environmental and
Context specific.
Context specific. So I think all he's saying is instead of 8, shouldn't there be 9? Like,
No, I'm not recommending dips as part of the preferred alternatives, although I think it should be considered. But if you're evaluating how we calm traffic in the city, you got to include.
For existing conditions, yeah.
And that's.
Well, that's what I'm concerned about, because you guys are saying things that aren't as easy as you think they are. You can go into an existing condition and put a speed hump in on top of the road. You can't go into existing condition and go, let's dig this out and put a dip here.
Yeah, there's grading that you'd have to do all around for drainage.
It's gonna take the grading way far away from there to actually get it to work properly like you want it to.
But I'm just saying, you're evaluating current traffic calming technology in the city. Dips are part of that technology.
Let me ask it from this point of view. Does the traffic department have a layout of the map, and when they're putting together a street listing obstacles that are included in the design of the street to include proposed elements, but also existing and say landscape feature elements that may do that in fact where you guys do place some of these elements?
I don't know if I grasped your question there.
Like basically you take a lottie and say you got like 3 dips, you got the traffic circles, we got a couple hills where site visibility is a little bit challenging. When you guys lay out your design to determine where you're gonna put additional measures, how do you guys come up with a big picture of that? And is there a way we could show that to the residents so that they could see kind of a snapshot, big picture of how we're coming to those conclusions?
I think that's what we're trying to get at with some of these location designs where we had DEA take a section of roadway, several blocks, and go, okay, what would you do with these several blocks? Would you keep what's out there today? Would you add to it? You know, what would you do? And that's what they're coming up with right now so that we can then apply that to other areas as we see fit. So kind of, I think that's what you're getting at, that would be something we could show someone, but when it comes to traffic calming, and especially in a city like Littleton, which is so old and established, it's a case by case. We have to go in and evaluate. We've got curbs that change width of roadways. We've got intersections that are offset. And it's a challenge.
Yeah. And maybe like we could see when one of these projects is completed, the design like a schematic plan where it's something not with all the details, but we can point out these features and show them, here's the big picture, here's the existing, now here's the proposed and why we did that. And maybe we could do that so we could explain it to the citizens, the more technical logic and why these choices are here, and they may have questions on like, well, what about these trees? What about this bush? What about this bridge? Well, there's a dead end here. I mean, just like Robert pointed out, they may have questions on things that engineers look at and we're like, oh, that's logical. Or that's not something that we would think about in that light, but it's the most important thing to that resident.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of our application, public outreach is a big component to that will have to be moving forward as we start to design and implement these.
It's also another good point to why, on an example, Lottie, just because we found out now that the traffic circles aren't the right application at certain locations, we don't go and just rip them out. We want to do a full corridor study where we also outreach to the people who live up and down there to go, what would you like to see? What are the key issues and concerns you have, and how would you like a design? Because at this point, we have lots of different options of how we handle bikes and peds, right? We could come in and just stripe bike lanes in the road like we have in places, or we have much more complicated options of either taking them outside the roadway, right, and doing a shared use path, building cycle tracks outside the roadway. But we don't want to do that if people aren't going to use it, or they're not going to like it, or if it doesn't work in the context of their neighborhood. So we're going to have to be sensitive to that. And a lot of it's going to come down to right of way and then prioritizing projects, because it's going to be expensive.
I know when we went out, like one thing that struck me on Lottie was they had that one traffic circle and everybody put every visible sign they could because they wanted it to work and they believe it'll work so much despite tragedy happening. But it's like, if we take that out, are they gonna see that as a failure? Are they gonna now be more scared? Are they gonna be very skeptical that, oh, this new thing's here, we know how this should work? How do we instill that in the populace so that they have the confidence in it and there's no fear or almost like alarm? Because change is hard for a lot of people.
I think people hate the traffic circles.
So I really appreciate you bringing up public outreach, because I think that's a really important part of this conversation. And quite frankly, people already are skeptical because of the move of the school zone signs that created a lot of skepticism. And, you know, the presentation that came around the school zone evaluation, that has not helped with trust in the whole in the process. So I think we're already dealing with skepticism. So I would encourage you guys to really focus actually more on the results of the evaluation than these new tools, because the first thing you have to do is use the results of the evaluation to justify changes with the new tools. I think there's a lot of people who are really interested in just, we've put in all these temporary things and did they work? And how do we, and I know you have that, but the presentation here really went to our new tools and and I think for the public, you gotta the new tools don't matter until we can show that the current infrastructure, either which parts worked and which parts aren't worked, and where do the new tools need to be employed.
Like the data for the crosswalks on.
Data for the crosswalk,
Oh, and
all that you gotta make.
We start with the problem and then come in with the solution.
Well, more importantly, make a case. I mean, first of all, you gotta make a case of what of the existing infrastructure needs to be changed. And you gotta make a case of the changes that we've done where we didn't ask for input, which was the council decision, not, so I own that decision. We made all these changes that we didn't ask for input, but we need to come back and say, this is what we've learned from those changes before we ever get to the whole new tool conversation. And I think we need to really focus on the evaluation part before we get to the tools part.
I think a big thing for the new tools is, if you look at the list of existing, notwithstanding.
Yeah, I understand.
A lot of them are things that are already in place. They're just updating to current best practice. Most of these preferred design treatments are already in place, barring say really dramatic pinch points and chicanes. So we aren't really straying too far off of applications that we already have.
We have not, as a council and as a TMB and as a city, have not fully made the case to people that we need to change our traffic management and how we do this stuff. And the evaluation is a huge tool, not the tools, the evaluation of saying, this is why we need to do these changes.
It's bringing data to the conversation.
Yes.
Before, the speed on Prince was 33 miles per hour. Since we added the tabletop, it's 26. You know, that.
No, without a doubt, when we do the pilot projects, we take before and after speed data to see the effect of
But
it.
I'm saying, we
You
gotta spend a lot of time communicating what you've learned from that, to justify using these new tools. Because we need to justify, quite frankly, the fact that we put in these temporary things and they worked, or they didn't work, and it's okay if they didn't work. I hope some of them didn't, right? That's the whole point of learning. But I just don't, I'm worried we're gonna get ahead of things, and because we already have in other situations, where let's talk about what we've learned from the data we have.
You know that Around the City with Jim or whatever that series was, like if you all did something like that and said, let's go look at the pilot projects we've put in. And then spend 4 or 5 minutes explaining each one. This one, the speed actually went up. This one wasn't very effective. This one went down. We're gonna double down on these. Like, I think that's, or with David Gilbert, or something.
I know,
Yeah.
I mean, we need an around the town with Jim around how the tabletops work. Nobody knows when they're supposed to stop and when they can go. Like, we don't know the rules of how those flashers work, and we don't have a common understanding in our city. I mean, we are way behind on that, I think, as a city in communication. And, I mean, this committee recommended that safer streets be a citywide challenge. And unfortunately, I only see Public Works carrying that water. Like, I don't see communications carrying the water. I don't see, and this is not you guys. I've already had this conversation with Jim. This is gonna be one of my themes of this year. I don't see the police carrying the water. I mean, there's just a lot of water you guys are the only ones carrying, and you're doing a great job. But we gotta figure out
It
how.
can't be just you. It doesn't work. We talked about that.
And, yeah,
One of the things we're working on right now is a strategic plan for safer streets, which is identifying responsibilities for police, for communications, along with public works, so that we all know what our responsibilities are and how do we bring this forward. It also puts some demands on our partners like Littleton Public Schools, and where does their responsibility lie? Or South Suburban, for example, when we're dealing with trails and crossings and stuff like that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why we're kind of pausing now. I think it's hard to point too much blame at police and communications up till now, because this was kind of thrown at the city. And a lot of what we were trying to do, which was do something quick, right? Do something, fell on Public Works. And until we can get some of these evaluations and stuff completed, it's hard for them to do a whole lot. But for example, communications, we've been working with them on every issue that comes out of either print or online. We try and have some sort of a safety article in there or something, an update on what we're doing with safer streets and stuff, to just slowly educate, but we want to ramp that up significantly.
So I'm gonna jump in here as chair. Like, we need to wrap this up because we need to leave time for the conversation.
but there is another way to spin the change, and the change for safer streets was thrown at the city, and the people who rose to the occasion was Public Works. And, don't give yourself credit for the amount of work and change that you guys did.
Blameless retrospective.
All right, now I'm done.
Any other important questions on this or anything else we need to talk about?
I guess just a statement, we do have the speed data for literally every existing traffic calming feature in the city. Point noted, when we talk about it in the future, we'll talk about that in more detail.
Shane, can you send that out to all of us?
Yeah, these additional slides or
The speed data.
Yeah,
And
once
then-
it's in, I'll say it's in draft format, so we'll wait until it gets to.
Can you send us the draft format?
Probably not.
There's a lot that like the
No perks.
We'll just do an open records request.
steps.
There you go.
You're getting to see all these in draft form because none of these have been finalized either.
I do think that both the speed data results of the pilot projects and these 8/9 traffic calming things, That could be really good for the Littleton report. I think the Littleton report is one of the things that a lot of people in the city read. No one reads, not a lot of people read any one thing, but that one's probably one of the higher ones. I think that could be good for it.
I do tend to agree with Robert's point. I think you gotta get people realizing there's a problem. And start putting solutions on them. Otherwise, it just feels like you've got some new toys you wanna play with. And so
I certainly struggle with that when I talk to the public.
Discerning
what level of detail.
We need to be like a one note of like,
Yeah.
we have speeding problems. We have speeding problems everywhere. We are at, our 95th percentile is whatever it is, like on average across all city streets. Every street has issues. School zones have issues. We have so many issues. And then you can start going into the next phase of, and we put up some of these pilot projects and a few of them worked. We brought down speeds from this to this. And look at that. And then we can go to, now look at all the cool toys we've got that we're gonna go to fix some of these problems. Once people start going, oh my God, there's a problem. What are we gonna do about it?
When we did the tour of the city and the guy stopped at the intersection at
We're gonna
Alani.
drive my truck around this.
My guess is that if he had been hearing for 3 or 4 months before that about how people were going too fast at it, and then was introduced to that, it may have taken the initial anger, away from it to be like, I'm aligned on the problem. This is a thing that they're trying,
Yes.
And we have so many old timers
Yeah.
that remember when the circles went in. And if we found, the fact that we found out they're not working the way we want, we have to tell them that, and they're interested in that. I mean, they're interested in I think that all the results of the evaluation be, I ran into a city councilwoman who was on the council when those circles were put in. And, she's invested to know whether they worked or not. Or whether and it's not even whether they worked, it's more of, are there better ways to do it now?
That'd be a fun, you can have a fun angle on it, like pitting all the traffic calming measures against each other, a battle, like a bracket, of which one had the best efficiency,
Are the ones we tried?
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move on. We're gonna need some time to discuss. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
That was good.
Thank you.
It would be good to get that speed data though, like
It'll be finalized very soon. It won't be a matter of
okay.
several months.
We'll be looking for it in our email. So the next topic on our agenda is we've talked about a couple times now is the TMP needs to be updated. 2026 is the year to do it. We need to provide input to that process, and yes, we decided that in order for everything to move efficiently and smoothly, we need to get our input in by July, in our July meeting. So call it 5 meetings that we have in that. So the next part of this is, certainly we're gonna have some openness. There's not there's no preset, like this is how we're gonna do that. We need to figure out what our process needs to be. And so there's some high level questions that we need to address, which is, and this is sort of member by member, but as the whole board, what kind of education do we need in order to feel like we can do that effectively? What type of input from staff do we feel like we need to have in order to do that effectively? So, kind of what do we need to do to be able to get going? And then the next part is, how do we want to do that? Like, do we want to just dedicate 2 or 3 meetings and that's all we're going to do is provide all of our TMP thoughts and input? Do we want to split up over the 5 and maybe split into subcommittees and have, 2 work on 1 or 2 sections, have 2 people work on 1 or 2 sections each, and then come together with recommendations that the whole group can weigh in on? Those are just sort of ideas we've had. But what we're looking for is some conversation around what do we want to do? How do we want to make this work so that on the end of the meeting in July, we have something to hand over to Shane and team saying, here's our thoughts.
Right, yeah, so. Is there
Okay,
that was a great.
Transition to you.
You wanna come to city council with us next time?
You could be the city manager.
That's right. Yeah, so this is a bit of a meta discussion tonight in that we're not asking you tonight to say, hey, what do we need to fix in the TMP? What needs to be in the next iteration? This is your one bite of the apple. This is to take a look, like Jeff said, to kind of plan out over most of the next year, how the TMP influences the update to the TMP, right? And what's your guys' what are your guys' priorities? What do you want to see that maybe wasn't in the last TMP, or what do you want enhanced, or what maybe even what do you think we need less of? So that's kind of the point of the conversation. So normally I put this in full screen mode, but Ken is not here to help out and like kind of take notes as we go. So I'm just going to type in the PowerPoint so that I don't forget anything. But I just want to go over a couple of intro slides to set the stage for the discussion, and then we'll just kind of jump into questions. And the format is just, I've got some posed questions, but it's really just to kind of talk about, how we tackle. So, all right. There we go. So kind of overview of the goals for tonight. The agenda for tonight, overview of goals, high level overview of the current TMP, and then discussion on how the board provides feedback.
I guess for 1 second, is there any board member who has not read the TMP? Okay. We all know what it looks like, so we can go quick through that part.
Okay. And it will be a high level overview. Timeline.
Second paragraph.
What's that?
I was distracting the conversation. Keep going.
Yeah, so here are the goals for tonight that I think would be beneficial. If we can achieve these goals tonight, then I think we'll be well on our way as a board. You guys will be well on your way. So one, establish a timeline for what this update looks like. Is this, are you guys gonna all try to tackle it in 1 month, maybe all read up and just hit it in 1 month in July and bam, we take that and go? Or do we take a chunk by chunk from, at every meeting moving forward and then kind of provide feedback that way? Process. So what does that process look like? Are you hitting everything, or are there just some specific areas of the TMP that you think are really important as a board that you want to provide feedback at? And then finally, establishing some roles and responsibilities. So like Jeff said, are we doing this all as a group once a month and we get done what we get done on that topic and move on? Or are we kind of establishing subcommittees, things like that? So things to talk about. So quick overview of the TMP. This is only 2 or 3 slides. So started all the way back in April of 2018, done concurrently with the comp plan. It was adopted in late 2019, October. Set a vision for the next 20 years of what Littleton would look like as far as transportation. And there were planned updates at 5-year intervals. Obviously, we were a little bit targeted on that first 5-year interval, and then incorporates idea from 22 previous plans. So the idea is obviously, as you guys know as board members, we have all these little like one-offs, right? We have the Broadway corridor study, we had the Littleton Linkages Trail study, right? The idea is that when you update the TMP, is that all these plans kind of coalesce and are updated in that transportation master plan, right? So you don't have to. Ideally, you look at the TMP and you don't have to go back and reference 22 other projects. What does this say? What does that say? Blah blah blah. So. Public engagement. So public engagement is one of the areas that in the 2019 Transportation Master Plan was a huge focus. So if you were here during that time, there were a series of speaking events, like one every single month throughout the process, where somebody would come in and talk about an aspect of community or what makes a healthy city. And then there would be opportunities to kind of provide, say, oh, I love this talk from so-and-so. This is how I'd like to see that play out in Littleton. And so here's some engagement stats. So we always can do better when it comes to public engagement. We would love for everybody to provide their opinion. But one of the stats that stood out to me of the adoption of the TMP was that I think it was Sheridan just did an update of their transportation master plan and adopted it a few months before. And I think they had talked to something like 250 people. And so you can see with all these engagements, like, not that Sheridan is the standard, right? But in comparison to kind of other engagement efforts, we did a pretty extensive job, and we'd love to build on that for this next update to make sure we engage as many residents and business owners and people who come and enjoy Littleton as possible. Here's just a quick overview of the contents of what's in the TMP. So there's the existing conditions. You establish mission and goals kind of high level. Then it goes into cars and freight, active transportation, walking and biking, transit, and then it goes kind of into some more philosophical stuff, mobility trends, complete network, which was kind of our, at the time, politically correct version of complete streets, and then an implementation plan. I think that's kind of a good place to pause before we get into, before we get into the kind of the next phase. But any questions on the TMP or anything like that?
Are we gonna throw the baby out with the bath, or are we gonna use the existing TMP as a template?
Yeah.
And then build on it?
Yeah, the
update, not a rewrite.
Yeah, exactly. It's an update, not a rewrite, right? So that doesn't mean that we're not just throwing it out and starting over, right? But that doesn't mean that we have to like, if there's an idea in there that we don't like as a city, we don't have to keep it necessarily. We can say, hey, things have changed. We've got, you know, new best practices, new data. And so we're going to change our approach to something.
And I'm sure if they're like, we're having a consultant do most of the work, right? So if they have recommendations of it might flow a little better if we do it this way, or it might be more usable if we do it this way, we can change sections around or merge sections, but it is to not create it just really from scratch.
Right, yeah. And if we're gonna remove something, I think, you know, we wanna have good justification, right? We went through a pretty extensive public engagement process, so we don't just wanna be like, oh, well, you know, all these people said idea A was great, but we just don't like it, so we're just gonna get rid of it, right? We need to have a good reason as to why we're updating these things and a good justification, so.
So I have two questions before we get kicked off. One is, and this, we talked about this in the meeting, is there a gold standard in TMPs that we could look at? I feel like from my perspective, if in the industry, everyone's like, oh, so, you know, so-and-so Indiana, like always is the best one. It'd be good to read that, just get a sense of what they do relative to ours.
Yeah, so since our conversation, because we had this talk at the coordination meeting earlier in the month, I reached out to a few consultants and I think I only got one reply, so I will re-ping them again. But if you remember the last spring, staff reached out to a couple of other jurisdictions that were similar in size and density to Littleton, Burlington, Vermont, and St. Louis Park, Minnesota. They both, I think, have pretty good TMPs. And when we talked with them, they said, hey, here's some things that we did well, and here's some things that we did not do well. So I think one of the things that I think would be good for a board is to have a date where we say, hey, we're just going to review a bunch of TMPs and come back, right, and discuss it as a board, right? And so staff will obviously help out with that, but I think that's a good thing for us to focus on. So, because I'm sure there is a gold standard.
I would also say that I'm less interested if they have the exact geographic size or population, and more like what results did they have, you know? Because I don't remember either of them having great results of those two cities. You know, Burlington and was it South Park?
St. Louis Park.
St. Louis Park, yeah. So it'd be good to say like which cities have actually gone and done the thing, you know, actually done it, not made the document, but actually implemented some really great infrastructure.
Right.
And then what were their guiding docs, you know, that got them there, you know? Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the other cities we reached out to, didn't get a response from, was Sheboygan, Wisconsin, where we saw that they get this huge flood of federal grant money in the early 2000s to build out bike infrastructure, and then it wasn't sustained and never updated. So you could go into like Google Street View and see the infrastructure slowly dissolve, right? So we don't want to do that for sure. I think the benefit of looking at similar size cities is that you know, like the land use density plays a big role on how transportation works. And so like Hoboken, New Jersey is often held up as like, hey, they've got all this transit and they've got, you know,
like a square quarter mile.
Right, and you know, like a suburb of Chicago that looks similar to us, right? Far more useful.
Yeah.
Than Hoboken or maybe Chicago, Dallas, or you know, because there is that aspect of geographically, we're not a city out in the middle of the plains. We are just part of a greater.
In the metro area.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Kelly, sorry. Did we jump in?
No, I just thought Matt would want to look at some European cities is all.
Yeah, we're
I'm not allowed to say Europe anymore.
So that was the one question. So if you could get that to us, I don't know if anyone else would find that useful. I think it'd be very helpful to be able to review some others and just get a sense of how different we are. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think you're spot on thinking about density and how that relates to the traffic plan, but we're in the middle of an increase in our density. Sure. And so if you're doing a plan for the future, do you pin your density on our current density?
Or in 2040, which is the plan.
Or even our density that we're gonna have at 2030, like, and that's just a tough question.
It is, yeah. And I don't.
You go the other way. I mean, the city I called when we did our whole thing was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which has a population of about the same size as ours. But, you know, we're at 50, they were at 150 40 years ago. So they're very different directions, right? It's like, you know, their transportation master plan, assuming they have one, is gonna be entirely different than ours, even though we're the same size city.
Well, I think that even like expectations around how much pedestrian traffic we're gonna have on any given street is gonna be different with our current density versus what density we think we're gonna have at 2030. And so I just think that's a problem for the planning process. That's really.
Yeah, it's just something you gotta include.
One thing I think we should look at when we get recommendations for cities is how they fund their planning mechanisms, because if we go to a city that's like one-off grants and everything, they don't prioritize and they don't want to put the effort at keeping and maintaining these plans. We need it to be something that the city regularly put work into. And if we don't compare it to those types of cities, we're not gonna get a good example.
Sorry, I'm trying to take notes as we talk.
So that was my first question. The second is more of a request, not for today. But once we start this process, I would like to ask, I think, staff to talk to us about how you use the TMP. How often you use it, what ways you use it, and get some feedback from you as to what would you like to see? Like,
What's missing?
would you like it structured differently? Would you like more detail or less detail? You know, what would make it a more useful document as far as what you do on a day-to-day basis? Because I assume that's what it's there for. It's supposed to be something you pull off the, like, how should we do this? Oh, let's pull it with TMP and see what it says. So we don't need to go into that right this second unless someone feels like that's important to talk about right now. But I do feel like as part of our process, it would be useful to have a 30-minute or so. But you guys on that.
Yeah, one aspect of that specifically, I think, is I would love to know, like, the developments that are going in at Mineral and Santa Fe. Like, what did these documents, how did these documents influence what they built there?
Like an example.
Yeah, cause, yeah.
So with that said, let's start talking about, oh, sorry, you have more?
Well, yeah, let me write this note down and then let me do one more slide and then I'll cut you guys loose. Impacted development. I guess I could go back and pause the recording later too.
From here on, we gotta be nicer to Kenna.
I know, yeah.
Everything falls apart.
I was like, my fingers are on fire over here. I'm like 3 words a minute.
Tap.
All right, so here's kind of a conservative timeline, right? So if we are, and this timeline assumes that we do a kickoff first part of January 2026. So kind of doing a work back schedule. This is how we got to that July date that Jeff mentioned, right? So through the whole process, the whole procurement process, if we want to launch, if we want to kick off on January 1st, then we need Team B recommendations by the July meeting essentially. So
What does our role look like after you select a consultant? Is this it? We have till July and then you're just gonna hand it over to a consultant to run?
So you guys will be one of the bodies that provides feedback on that. So the last TMP, and Aaron, feel free to jump in here. The consultant came in, it was kind of in the middle of the TMP. It was kind of an awkward time.
Our first meeting was like, here, approve this.
Yeah, right. And so we'll kind of figure that out. But one thing I think is important to say is that you guys are one board, right? One piece of the city that's going to provide feedback. Because I think we had some board members who, they went through and made some suggestions and then they saw the final document and they're like, hey, we wanted this in and this out. And so explaining, they're like, hey, you guys aren't the only board that's providing input, right? And there's a process, some things get kept because they're popular and other things are not for whatever reason, right?
Tempering our expectations.
Yeah. So you will still be involved, right? And so I'm sure that, and council will be part of that process too, and giving staff direction on what it looks like for, the TMB to be involved. So TBD, but it won't just be, okay, you guys put in input on the RFP and now you don't ever get to see it until it's done.
The way I see
So
it,
that-
Michael, is this is our opportunity, all the surveys, all that, this is our opportunity to put our survey results in, right? It's just, hopefully our thoughts are weighted slightly higher than some of the other inputs.
Michael's.
All that goes into the sausage machine. The consultant's gonna work on it. I'm assuming I would like us to push to say at least some point during the process that the consultant talks to us and says, here's what we're thinking, here's what we've taken into account.
Or a study session in front of council.
There you go.
Discussing it too.
We'll be able to review it before it's done. And then, and to Shane's point, there's things we're not gonna like in that. There's things we're gonna be like, that was not what we said, or we don't agree with that. We will submit a memo along with it to council that says, here's the things we like, here's the things as a board we're not thrilled with. And that, but ultimately, we're not gonna vote on it this time, right? Like last time, it's not gonna be like the board, because we don't have any any votes or power anymore. So we won't be voting on it. So it's just gonna be a review and providing advice.
But I think the council will be interested in your consensus perspective. And I think that, you know, that's just as powerful as your vote, is your consensus perspective, and maybe more powerful.
Similar to how we had the safe streets meeting, we could go in and have a meeting about this too, potentially.
Are you done?
Yes, sorry. So this is just a summary of questions that. Sorry. Question, yeah, Jeff, you go. This is discussion time. I'm the note taker now.
So you set up right there for me, perfect. I guess I'd like to just quickly go around the room and just kind of get a sense from everybody, answering a few questions.
Questions in slide 8.
Do, yeah, I don't have a great way to show both, I guess.
What's on slide? Oh.
You just put 7 questions across 2 slides.
So all this comes down to it's the questions of you know, staging this. How do we want to get this done in 5 months? Do we want to try to just descend on it for 1 or 2 meetings? Do we want to spread it out? Do we want to have the whole board try to talk about the whole thing all at once? Do we want to split the subcommittees? And what are, like, as we think about it, like, what do we think the odds are we can get this done? And part of my sense is there's no way we get this done in 4 or 5 meetings. We probably need to have some study sessions. Like, we're probably gonna have to have at least 2 to 3 additional meetings beyond our standard monthly meetings. That's my own personal opinion.
What is the urgency for July? I guess I still don't understand. Why are we rushing to give you recommendations if we're not even starting this till next year?
Yeah, so this is specifically with like the RFP or RFQ process. And so when we try to come up with a draft scope of work, right, and this is what we're looking for. And so the idea is that if there's special things in there that we want to see as a board, if they make their way into the RFP, then we'll get a better team or set of teams who may be specialized in that, who can provide those services versus like run of the mill. I don't know that we work with run of the mill consultants, right? But we pick a consultant because they have the best overall TMP, but we decide throughout the process, hey, there's something we'd really like to see, whether that's special kind of data collection or mobility. And then it's hard at that point, since we have somebody in our contract, to say like, oh, we don't have this expertise. And so they're kind of like, yeah, so.
So I think what you're asking the TMP is to write at most a page of work requirements between now and July. These are the things we want to have that are key priorities for the new updated plan, right? I mean, that's what you want them to write. Is it? I mean, the RFP is going to be 1,000 pages, but the SOW is only going to be 5 pages.
Yeah.
And what you're asking them for is, in those 5 pages, what are the key priorities that you want either continued from the prior prior piece of work or new to this new piece of work? And the new things can be new focus, new analysis. I think it's either new focus or new analysis. Or like, when I say focus, I mean like priorities around pets and stuff like that.
I assume too that once the consultant is selected, like, they're working on it. So we don't really have an opportunity to, like, every couple months send them stuff. It'll just be, this is what you all prioritize at the beginning, and they're gonna go run with that. That's my assumption. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be check-in points, yeah.
So I think I agree with you on one hand, like I don't know, I mean, I'm certainly not prepared to write it in each document.
Right.
I have no interest in and no ability to do that. 1 to 2 pages is what I had pictured, but I guess where I'm coming from is to get to those ideas, we all need to digest the TMP. We all need to have a sense of like what we think is important and not important in there, and get around to that, and so we can then use that to process to say, here are the changes, or here are the new things, or here are the things we'd like to remove. And I feel like there's a lot of time and effort work that goes into getting to that 1 to 2 pages.
I'm looking at that 7 or 9 thing, list that the chapter headings, if you will. I think there are several of them on there that we can avoid, like the background and some of the existing things. And if we look at the trends what we think the trends are, and that's where we need to be putting our focus, and just use that as sort of our bullet points to organize so that we can go from having 9 subjects that we've got to look at to having 3 or 4, which then makes it achievable within your August timeframe or July timeframe.
Yeah. I definitely agree. We don't, introduction and planning context, we don't need to worry about. Existing city is not really our problem. Mission and goal. Then auto and freight is a big section. Active transportation is a big section. It needs to be bigger probably. Transit, the mobility trends, I'm not sure if we're the best people to weigh in on that, but maybe a little bit. The complete network recommendations, because that Pam wants to be part of that one. And then the implementation, I'm not sure if we weigh in that, if that's more on the staff.
Yeah.
Still, there's big sections.
Huge sections, but we can get rid of some of the fluff.
I think one thing that I would add for this too is, we talk a lot about like, what does the TMB want? And then also what does like surveying residents, getting feedback from residents? This might sound silly, but like you all literally have dedicated your careers to this. I'm pretty interested to know what you all think should be, should go in here and be approved. And so like in terms of educational sessions, like for us to be educated on, I would love to know from you all, like what things were not like, what things didn't go far enough, what's missing, Heath in the past has said like, the city was actively hostile to a lot of active transportation in the past. Like that's a different dynamic now than it is, and so how do we, like what do you, from your all's perspective, what goes into that as well? And more than us is my perspective. Yes.
Sometimes.
Like the way we could approach this is like, say the first meeting on it is we have more of like a 2-hour session. Here's the TMP, here is how it works in the city, here's how it ties into the code, here's how it affects development. Like this is why the TMP works.
Yeah.
But like in the more official and legal tie-ins where the TMP is effective at, because there's have impact and there's certain parts where we'll have less impact. We need focus where the input and the decisions need to be made, but we need to understand how it works. And I can tell you as a professional engineering field in my private life, there's a lot of people that really just don't understand what a TMP is. Why do they care? Why should they care? And maybe this could be something that it's presented to us, that could be brought to like a city website or something for training, or for something that the city residents can get in and get some understanding and learning so that maybe they have some emphasis on it. Once we do that, we can use that to lead into probably the first round of study sessions where, okay, now we've identified what's important. Now we can jump into some special areas, like whether it's ADA, whether it's multimodal, whether it's the transportation network, whether it's the design standards, whether it's how the comp plan affects and influences the transportation master plan. And then I think once we get to that point, that's gonna be where we probably need to have a discussion about the next focus steps, because at that point, we'll know where we want to go because we'll actually have that knowledge. And we'll have like kind of that decisions of inputs, and we could get that done probably say by March at the latest, maybe even a little bit, probably March at the latest, to influence the next steps and see where we need to really focus time into. Because we all know we want to change it. We all know we want to update it and make it better. But can anybody here say, other than like maybe a big topic, like where do we put our energy and effort? No. And I would
be more clear. Yeah.
I would love to get that clear and then kind of have like a mid-stage where we say after that, okay, now we know where the target is. Now we know the information. Now we know where the staff needs to give us more focus or direction or input or information.
So you're did I hear right? You're saying use the better part of 2 meetings to,
I would say maybe a study session in a meeting. Because if we have, say, one session where we learn about transportation master plan 101 to 401 in a quick 2-hour session, that can give everybody a good part, then we can break up like pieces and parts and then get into like more study session groups based off of who we have or how we want to divvy up those responsibilities. And then once we do that, learn, get that knowledge, now we're looking at it with this effectiveness of where it influences stuff. Now we can get into the parts and figure out which parts we want to bring up for further discussion or such.
thoughts?
To really understand EMP and
I think, I also think I heard you said at the end of that session, you would make a plan.
We would,
Either make a plan for another meeting to make a plan or make the plan
I
right.
think then after that session, it would be figure out for a study session and break up pieces and parts based off of each individual's either choices or assignments or delegations. And then at the study session, kind of come back and then we're like, okay, we've looked at the freight section and we have looked at these parts and these parts are like, we really think these are interesting or these are missing. Or, hey, I looked at the safety action plan. These are the factors that I want to see in it or that I don't want to see or that the citizens they brought up. And just come to that so that we're not just coming at blindly.
So just to make sure I understand, at the end of the February meeting, assuming we do it at the February meeting, we're gonna have, we would set aside 15 minutes for us to all talk about, like, come up with our top 10, top 6 or 8, or whatever number list of areas based upon what we just heard.
Yeah.
That we think need further exploration. And then put names next to each one.
I think so.
And then have a study session 2 weeks after that, let's call it.
Kind of just bring all of that together and then come with, okay, here's gonna be the next big steps that we need to be taken because we need to get city staff feedback. We may need to get public feedback. There could be many roads that we open, and if we don't know what those are now, it's hard to get that. And I think that education is the most important thing right now.
So I will look for other people to push back because I know that getting ahead of things and giving ourselves more time always works, but I'm an inherent procrastinator, so that part of me always wants to wait until July 29th to actually do anything. Do we need to jump on this and go down that path? Do you guys feel like that's the way we need to go, or do you think there's a slower or more procrastinating path, if you will? Like, is that?
I mean, is there anything that is urgent or more pressing, I suppose, like topic wise or discussion wise for
the next few March and April?
We just said,
One of them was trying to get superintendent in here.
That's true, which I think is actually pretty important. Sorry, I finally started eating dinner. That's why I am happy off camera.
Kelly, since we've got you, would you like to weigh in on this question and the thoughts?
Of the process?
Yes.
I mean, I think dividing it makes a lot of sense. We're really gonna, I could see it being a challenge as there may be ideas and opinions about all of the sections per se, but it's just, I think, too much for every voice to come in on every piece. so I think where you were proposing like, I don't know, working groups, subgroups, whatever we want to frame it as, makes a lot of sense. I would like to, because I probably took part in this exercise and most certainly don't remember it. Also, read other master plans, like you were also, referencing again, finding similar size and scope geographies and looking at kind of what they've done, just to see, you know, I mean, again, it would be expertise of the board of the staff to tell us like, oh, you're really missing this piece or something, but sometimes you don't, when you look at something so much or it's right in front of your face, you can miss things.
So Shane figured out what we.
Sure. So this is kind of the tentative schedule we have laid out. A debrief from the February 25th Safer Streets Council meeting. So I believe our next meeting is on the 28th, but staff has a presentation to council tentatively scheduled for the 25th. So just kind of a debrief from that. So if you could put that in your calendars, that'd be good. Communications plan. Solicit ideas for the April TMB memo to council. This is all February. And then touch base on the Safer Streets strategic plan. Do you want me to keep going subsequent?
March and April, if you would.
Yeah, March we have a next gen joint session ? LPS superintendent, and then finalized TMB memo to council. April 24th, 2025 board transition. And then deliver TMB memo to council. That's all we have for April. May is transit. How can Littleton impact transit in the area? Talk about TMAs, mobility grants, on-demand transit, things like that. And then we don't have anything down for the rest of the year.
So in there, I mean, if we think kind of just very tactically, the Safer Streets presentation to council, we can just all take responsibility. We'll watch the video. I don't need to have a whole session, and maybe this had like 10 minutes, 15 minutes for us to talk about it. The board memo, we need to take some time to just make sure we get that put together. Superintendent would be good. So maybe that's, if we can get him in March, that would be good. It sounds like we could make room in February to do this. So I guess the next two other questions, unless there's other pushback or other ideas on how to proceed, to me the two big questions are who from staff would actually do the TMP education 101, and then from us, I'm going to look at you because you're more knowledgeable than anyone else, but I feel like we need to give staff a bit of an agenda, like even if it's not organized, but like here are the 5, 6, 8 topics that we would like to address during that presentation, so that so they know what to prepare for.
So when we say education, that's like the elements of the TMP, or is that hearing what staff likes and doesn't like and feedback and
Needs.
and needs and limitations on things? It's really, I'm more interested in that than like.
Because I know that you
traffic
know a little bit more, but like, why is a TMP made? How does it work? How does it actually influence the city? Why is it important? Which parts of it are important? How does it influence the city and development and everything else? Because there's a lot of cities and a lot of residents that just see everything go in. They don't know that how important the transportation master plan is to make all of this system tie together. And without that knowledge, it's hard for us to make a recommendation because we would be coming at it from more of an ignorance point of view, and being able to eliminate that will allow us to provide better feedback as we could filter the citizens' interests, demands, and everything else, put it through a bastion of knowledge, and then discuss it with city staff who has done this a whole entire career and come out with a really effective solution.
Where would looking at good examples occur in the process that you're.
I think that would be a part of the study sessions.
But that makes sense, but I thought I heard you, are you thinking that staff would say, here's some examples of good ones, or in the past, you guys have gone and looked at those things? Was,
For Vision Zero, we did, yeah.
which part, this is a question, not a, how do you want to navigate
I
that?
don't know which side of that would be more effective. I'll rely on my experience.
My preference would be to say, here's whatever the name of the city, here's like 2 or 3 cities, here's links to their websites for their TMP, and then
So that's an assignment for you guys between now and February.
that would be my preference, but I'm open to.
So I see it. Yeah, it's on us.
Thank God said.
Sorry.
It's not you, it's your voice is from above.
If you say something, it's like, oh, where did it come from?
Well, I'll just go back to eating then.
But I would also not mind like working with the city staff and helping to develop an agenda, given my experience, so that I could help tailor it in a way I think would be very effective.
Helpful.
Diving into these documents without actually knowing, you're like a salesman and not being able to, I don't know what your problem is, so I can't sell you the fix. Okay? So I need to have a better understanding of how you use the TMP and what we think ours is missing.
So to your mind, it's having the education first, and then you'd want to go read them before the study session, because now you have this vision of like, okay, this is what it's supposed to do.
I know more what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then, yeah, like my guess, if the document's 100 deterministic for how the city does stuff, like road classifications, or things like that, there's a whole bunch of fluff. And I would like to spend as little time
On fluff.
on fluff as possible. Like, this fluff can be helpful, but it's not the meaty thing that actually has as much impact, Yeah.
So I'm gonna look at there's only 3 staff members in here. I'm looking at all 3 of them, like.
Aaron just looks at them whenever we look at him.
Is that something you guys can do for us for a February meeting if we, can you honor that request? Feel comfortable in executing successfully.
Executing something.
Yeah.
It is a tough month because we have our precinct. If it's just a kind of a high level discussion of here's how we use it, that's not very hard. If you're looking through, okay, here are all the key things for the fluff, and here are the ones to focus on, the type of things you want to look in other ones. It gets a little more involved. It's still possible. I'm just thinking through what everyone's working on in the next month.
Yeah.
And it's a lot.
I would say so.
God here.
That was the best intro ever. That needs to be on her, on the bottom of her thing. God.
So I appreciate the honest answer. And my inclination is like almost to have you is better, because then it's a very just like honest and candid dialogue of yeah, I've referenced it twice, or you know what, I'm actually flipping through it every day. I mean, I think there is a certain kind of honesty that I'd love to have, honesty without judgment, and so I think high level is totally fine in my opinion.
And the goal is to get an evaluation or an understanding of how we use it and how it's useful and things like that. Okay.
I think, and if there's even I don't know, while this development was coming in and I was, I don't know, I needed to remind myself or just check what we were thinking around, how to.
I mean, I think really what you're answering the question is, what are the important things for the TMB to focus on? And through your experience using the last one.
And honestly, they're talking about how we make it in layman's terms.
You know, Pam says frequently, and I agree with her, that there's so many documents, you know, and we should really, like, we should actually, you know, like, for instance, is the TMP a subset of envision living? Then do the actual requirements when they go to build a sub for TMP? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, connecting those dots for us would be, I think, really helpful. Yeah. And also, you know, then maybe we could even take a homework assignment to go share something with the public, you know, on this was our education of it. You know, we wanted to share that with you all. And this is why these conversations are important over the next few months. Come to these meetings and do public comment.
I think that is an excellent idea, Matt.
Look at that positive feedback within.
Yes.
So can I ask you to work with them to just do it where we're very, very aware of how much load you have to do in February already, but still help us. Just like, what do you think we should be focused on as we're thinking about this and splitting off into study groups? And then we will talk about setting up a study group session approximately 2 weeks after the February meeting, early mid-March. Where we go from there. The other thing we gotta keep in mind is we're getting a new member in April.
And who's out?
Tom.
Tom is not running for re-election. And is that, so are people interviewing these next couple of months in order to?
Yeah, we're scheduling interviews now.
Okay, yeah.
They're all, the applications aren't different on a week or so, but then
So will April
Get
be
to
his
the end of the
last
month.
one, presumably?
March will be his last one. April is the new, at least historically, assuming they can get their job done. April is when all the new board members come in.
Is there anybody who's up for reappointment? That is,
Tom was up for reappointment, but he's choosing not to.
is there anybody else that's up for reappointment?
It's the only 2025, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then us three, I think, are 2026. Yeah. We all joined at the same time.
27.
Oh, yeah, because you
were
had a really
I think
good
I'm
one.
26. I think I'm the other 26.
Yeah.
Before you adjourn, I want to do a council member's report.
Please.
So I was going to talk about the new boards and commissions and the fact that, you know, you guys are going to change in composition. I wanted to just, you know, we had two really big things happen on the council over the last month. One was the missing middle conversation that we had, and the other one is we have a new council member. And so I just wanted to make sure you guys were updated on that. So the missing middle conversation was a conversation that we've been having on the council for about a year. And we defined, or missing middle is defined as essentially housing types that are in between the two main housing types we have in the city, which is we have single family homes and we have multifamily homes. And the missing middle are in between that, which is duplexes, triplexes, and quads. And so the staff, and I think staff developed a recommendation completely following council's guidance. Like staff was not ahead of council, just be really clear. Staff developed a recommendation to essentially allow duplexes, quads, and triplexes anywhere in the city where we have single family homes right now. And then there's also the other part of that is the cottage courts communities, which are multiple smaller houses on a single lot. And so that's also part of the missing middle. And so, but you know, what we heard, what happened in December was a lot of people were surprised by that. And I think that also is a reflection of decisions made by the council, because the council council could have decided to do more public engagement than we did on this. And so, so that there was a large group of people who, you know, opposed those changes, and in our last meeting, those changes were tabled. And so we are going to have a conversation at our next meeting around what do we want to keep doing with this. But I personally am sad about the whole thing. I think as a council, we've lost some trust. And it's gonna make it harder for us to do other things that we wanted to do. And so I'm sad about the situation that we found ourselves in. Any questions about that? The one thing I want to be, what happened was totally product of council decision making. There was no staff kind of out in front of us. They did exactly what we asked them to do. Any other?
I would say a comment is that, I went to both of those meetings, and the first one, it was like, 170 survey results, 160 survey results is not indicative of public sentiment. But 250 people is, I mean, of the city of Littleton. And so I feel like, from my perspective, in terms of like, it's really small groups of people in both directions, want to believe that they are the majority perspective, but there's 45,000 people, in the city, and so, yeah.
I guess I appreciate your point. My big concern is how much is this gonna derail other things that we want to do?
Yeah, that's huge.
So that's, and I think at a minimum, we've already kind of decreased our ability to do things just because our trust levels have gone down.
I think with other groups, your trust level has gone up because you actually council tried to make progress on some of these things that are so damaging. So we have, whatever our perspective is, we tend to think that is everyone's, and that's
You're right.
Yeah.
No, that's, yeah. And in some ways, that's me speculating about things that we all are, couple.
I asked your first question, was the denial an absolute, or is it something maybe in a different form or a method more in agreement with the citizens that could be brought up later for?
Well, so the only real decision we made is that the proposed changes to the ordinance were tabled. And tabled indefinitely. And so the mayor requested that the city manager come back to us on the 28th around a plan for what to do next. And so we're going to have that conversation. I feel very confident that what to do next will include us revising our code to comply with the state changes in state laws that require pretty much no barriers to implementing ADUs.
by June, that has to be done.
That's right. I think we have till June 30th. And I'm fairly confident that, yeah, I mean, there'll be some discussion about whether we even want to do that, but I'm fairly confident we'll be prepared for that part of the conversation. But what else we do around missing middle? I know that the mayor said he wants to move forward with duplexes, but I think we're going to have a conversation next week, and I don't know what's going to happen.
So what I'm hearing from people I associate with in the city, I think it leads it right back to what you were talking about in terms of just getting word out. There was so much misinformation and people were just so confused by the whole thing. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think that's, I take responsibility for that because I think we could have done a better job. Sure. And, one of the things is just the code that we use in, we talked about missing middle for so long, but I don't think that people made that translation to, oh, this is going to change the zoning for my lot. And even now, and this, I'm not, it's making, there was another conversation we had at the council meeting where I'm like, oh, that's in code. Nobody knows what that is. And so, so I think, it just, for me, I'm going to do more public meetings because I think just helping translate the code of what we're talking about is something that I need to do more of. So,
Yeah, and the spectrum of what people said was going to happen as a result of these were so wide.
Yes.
You know, like, it's gonna become a third world country, it's gonna become every home is $5 million, you know? And then everything in
That
between.
comes down, my candid feedback is it felt a little shot out of a cannon. It's like the expectations, you know, if I could critique council a little bit, to try to do what we're proposing to do probably should be like a 2 to 3 year process, not a 1 year with really most of the work condensed into 3 to 4 months. There's just a lot of information that needs to get out, so there's not misinformation. You know, looking through the code, I was working with one of my neighbors who is in the business, and we were going through, and things that were presented by staff were actually not in the drafts that were put out, or drafts had some errors, and I mean, it was just, and listen, I'm sure staff was way overworked on this. There's probably a lot to do in a very short amount of time, and so errors are gonna happen. But then it's like, well, we're saying this is not gonna happen, or this will happen, and then you go read the document, and there's nothing in there to say that it will go or won't go. And so it's just, it was shot out of a cannon. Like it just,
Well,
it needs more time to try to do that much.
Yeah, but
Now,
But what I will share to Matt's point is there's definitely a contingent in the city that is gonna say no to any change whatsoever. Like there's just no change.
By definition, change is the thing that is
I
not
moved here
allowed.
in 1978. I want it to look exactly like it did in 1978. And I want nothing.
It's untenable.
And that is a small group. There's also a small group who's like, I want the whole thing to change, like right now, do it this moment and make huge changes. What I will tell you, just talking to neighbors and talking around the city, there is an opening for change. People are open to it, but they need to feel
Healthy middle ground.
that they're not gonna get, I mean, the reality is like, you know, there's some ugly, big, massive things that have been put up in the city in the last 5 years. And nobody, you know, I guarantee you, in my neighborhood, nobody wants that going up next to them in a single family home neighborhood. Now, if there's what, you know, but, and I think you brought up in meetings, the idea that like, you know, things that fit with the character and aren't too obtrusive. If you make that 2 units versus 1 unit or 3 units, maybe instead of 1, I think there's people are gonna be very open to that.
Our current approach, I mean, you know, a huge part of the disagreement with the changes came from my neighborhood. And, you know, and Aberdeen Village is where I live. And Aberdeen Village has some blood ugly scrapes. And our current approach to allowing people to redevelop their land, we don't currently employ a lot of tools to kind of have things fit the character.
For single family homes even as well.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah.
And so we're not, as a city, flexing. And for me, my concern about flexing character tools, I mean, we have them, but flexing them adds to cost. And ultimately, and this is my perspective, right? I'm not talking for the council. I mean, the goal of the missing middle was for the council was absolutely to add more options, just create more housing options. But a goal of that would be that the housing option, for me, is the housing options are more affordable than our current set of, and affordable means just cheaper than our current set of single family homes.
Diverse options as well.
Diverse options.
Yes,
I
yeah.
don't think that's feasible. Just the cost of building now and I mean, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I don't think it's a realistic goal, at least not short term, like longer term, like, you know, create, like slowing the curve of cost of.
Yeah, that's capital A affordability.
That is something but to think that like the next one that goes up is gonna be cheaper than the little tiny thing that they bought to put it up on I just don't think it's realistic.
I think that's a question of, there's like affordable, like you could work and make $70,000-$80,000 a year and buy a home. That ship has sailed. You know, so it's like, is it more affordable? Is the growth rate of housing prices like slow, like not as rapid, you
For
know?
me, the fundamental problem is the supply of houses is not kept up with the demand for the past 15 years.
And diversity of options as
But
well.
even just the basic supply,
Yeah.
just the basic supply is not
That's a
kept up.
metro area issue. That's
No,
not.
that's a national issue.
Well, I mean, it's definitely, it's not a Littleton. I mean.
No, that's right. It's not, but Littleton's part of the metro area, right? We can't solve it all. But yes, yeah.
And let me confirm, there's a lot of state laws that come July 1, whether Littleton has done something and brought rules that are Littleton specific or our state of Colorado specific, we have a hard deadline that is.
Yeah, that's the ADU thing is the state law that we will comply with. I think I'm willing to guess that within Colorado, there will be a home rule city that challenges. But that is not where I want to spend our resources as a city.
I also think that
But I'm only one vote.
if many municipalities collectively continue to very much so restrain supply, the state will feel even more compelled to have a heavy hand, and so we could potentially be one that moves in the right direction and says, this is an example of how we can do it.
But it's all shades of gray, it's not black and white. Before we move on, I wanna say something. Staff, you guys have families and all sorts of stuff.
Yes, sorry.
No longer transportation related. You guys would like to go home?
We could probably end the meeting.
We can end the meeting.
I have one more thing I want to say, which is, Gretchen has resigned, and so she has been replaced. And so we selected a guy named Joel Zink. And Joel is a Arapahoe County DA, and relatively new resident to Littleton. His wife is also an attorney. I don't think they have kids, but they live over by Stern Park. I think he is a very engaging, smart man, and I think that's part of the reason. We had a great slate of candidates, and we interviewed 7 people. I'm really proud of the council that we made a good decision without rancor and without disagreement, because that can be a problematic decision. We were originally split 3-3, and a council member was like, no, you persuaded me this is the right person. I thought that was really, really valuable. But we also had a great set of candidates, and I think a lot of those candidates are probably going to run because there are 4 they're not vacancies, there are 4 seats open this fall. And I think it's going to be, I was just really grateful for who showed up and the quality of the people that showed up. It was a very hard decision, and I hope you guys get to know Joel. He's a really friendly, outgoing guy, and brought a new set of skills to our council. We don't have any attorneys on the council, and I think we were in part of the reason people were interested in him is just he brought new capacity to the council we didn't have. We were grateful for that. That's it. I'm done. Thank you for letting me do the report.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Staff, any comments? All right. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks for all your help.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Good night. Yeah. I was able to move on to dessert, so thanks.